let's do a local story here about racial profiling. Now, both Montreal and Laval police have recently had a couple of court decisions made against those respective departments. It's going to change the way they do certain things. Now, Niemi is on the line, General Director of CRARR. Welcome back to the program.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Why don't you break it down? These two rulings, right? And there's one for Laval Police, one for Montreal Police. And please correct me if I'm wrong here. Why don't you take me through what recently judges have said to both the Montreal Police and the Laval Police?
Well, it's both cases involving police stops of vehicles driven by black men, and in both cases, the courts have found that basically the race of these drivers played a role in the way that they were stopped, but not only how they were stopped, but also how they were treated afterwards. In the Montreal case, it's about stopping. Basically, the police officer noticed the black driver and then decided to further check the license plate because he saw that the license plate carried the word F, which is for a rental car. And we have had in the last 10 years many cases involving black men driving a rental car and being seen as being suspicious, where they're requiring some sort of interception and checkup. The case in Laval also involving a black man driving, Mr. Woodley driving his car and being stopped, just basically routine traffic stop. But out of that, it's basically the whole situation degenerated into the part where basically he was threatened. He got tickets and all kinds of very, very negative and even threatening interaction between the police officers and Mr. Woodley, and therefore the Human Rights Tribunal in that case ruled that he's been a victim of racial profiling, and that awarded him a total of, I believe, almost $19,000 in damages.
Now, does this all have to do with, the back and forth I hear between police forces and the provincial government and advocates on random stops? Is this all related to that?
Well, the word random has to be to be proven, because sometimes the police officer would say that they have a valid reason to stop because the car is suspicious, the car met description. Sometimes they said yes, it's random because it's under the Highway Safety Code. They have basically absolute power to decide to stop a car to do some ID check if the car is in a public lane. So whether it's random or not, that's one issue. The other issue is what's the reason to stop the car. And the third issue is once you stop a vehicle, what happens in the interaction between police officer and the driver? And usually, for example, the degree of escalation can be associated with the fact that the driver's race is the result, is associated with the escalation.
So, I go back and forth on this subject because I hear various perspectives, and I just want to throw something at you here. I've spoken to Christopher Skeet, who is the minister responsible for the fight against racism, and he's got some law enforcement background. He used to work as a border guard at one point in his career. And, Fadi Daguerre, who is Montreal's police chief, both of these people, by the way, are racialized people. And I've heard that, they've gone to bat for certain practices that I know you'd like to see stopped. And I see that. And by the way, I look at New York City, Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, former cop, a black man, and he brought back stop and frisk, and he says it's a useful tool. So I see those kinds of things. And then I hear you and I go back and forth. I'm like back and forth on this subject on the proper way of policing. What do you say when you hear these advocates for certain practices that you'd like to see stopped?
Well, one thing that I've learned to develop over the years, especially in the last 25 years, is that change is going to take time, because you're talking about not only changing organizational practices, changing the laws, but more importantly, changing individuals' behaviors, mindset, and among other things, attitudes. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of change you need to see happening in all police departments, despite the leadership that it's there, because the leadership is at the top. Fortunately, we do have some police leaders like Chief Daguerre in Montreal, who is committed and who is doing everything possible to change that organizational culture to ensure those values trickling down into to the front line, where the change in police officers' behaviors, attitudes, thinking and values will be changed. And, these changes sometimes take a generation. It's just like if you compare with dealing with domestic violence, it takes time. It requires constant vigilance and constant pressure in order to inform people, instruct people as to why the way you're doing things can lead to race discrimination and profiling. Until then, we continue to have incidents like these. Until then, we continue to have, among other things, court judgments that will be very, very significant to help move those changes forward.
So, Fo, let me ask you, I think in the Laval ruling, the judge there said that the police force has to collect more data on the stops that they do. Let's talk about that aspect. Do you think just collecting data can help here?
Race-based data collection is essential because only with valid data, objective and reliable data, that we can prove, among other things, disproportionate impact or disproportionate stops, in this case, police profiling. Because often, if we don't have the data, we have to go with anecdotal evidence, we have to go with impressions and subjective interpretations. But when the data are there, it's just like it's the data for any other social problems we need to quantify and qualify. And it's the data can help convince, among other things, the police trainers and police leaders as to why, based on the data, the problem does exist and one has to recognize and do something about the problem.
Fo, we have to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for coming on the program this morning.
Oh, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Fo Niemi is General Director of the Center for Research Action on Race Relations.